The envelope wasn't wrapped in silk or tied with a satin ribbon. It was a standard beige legal folder, heavy with the weight of 30 pages of betrayal. It sat on the marble kitchen island, right next to the bottle of Chateau Margaux Madeline had opened an hour ago to let breathe. The 2015 vintage, Dominic's favorite. Madeline Sterling stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her Hamptons estate, watching the Atlantic Ocean churn in the twilight. The house was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. It was their 5th anniversary. She was 62. Dominic was 45. And at 6 p.m. sharp, instead of her husband walking through the door with flowers, a process server had handed her the envelope. The front door clicked open. Madeline didn't turn. She listened to the footsteps, heavy, confident, the stride of a man who believes he owns the floor he walks on. "I see you got the package," Dominic said. His voice was devoid of guilt. It was businesslike, clinical. He walked into the kitchen, tossing his keys onto the counter. He didn't look at the wine. He looked at her back. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Madeline," he continued, pouring himself a glass of water from the fridge, completely at ease. "I've been unhappy for a long time. You're tired. You want to retire. You want a garden. I have ambitions." Madeline finally turned. She wore a simple silk blouse and trousers, her silver hair pulled back in an elegant chignon. Her face was unreadable. No tears, no redness, just a stillness that usually terrified her board of directors. "Ambitions," she repeated softly. It wasn't a question. "Yes, look, I've outlined a settlement." Dominic gestured to the envelope. "It's generous, considering I've managed your portfolio for 5 years. You have 2 choices. Option A, you sign the settlement within 48 hours. You keep the house in the city, I take the Hamptons estate and a lump sum of $10 million for my consulting contributions. We keep it quiet, no press." He took a sip of water, his eyes narrowing. "Option B, we go to court. I drag this out. I expose your health records, your mental decline. Don't look at me like that. My lawyers can paint a very convincing picture of a senile old woman being taken advantage of. You'll spend the rest of your life in depositions. You leave this marriage with your reputation in shreds." He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe she had bought him last Christmas. "I'm staying at the plaza tonight. I need space. Read the papers, Madeline. Be smart. Don't let your emotions ruin what's left of your legacy." He grabbed an overnight bag he had clearly packed days ago from the hallway closet. He didn't say goodbye. He just walked out. The door slammed. The silence rushed back in, louder than before. Madeline didn't move for a full minute. She didn't throw the wine bottle. She didn't scream. She walked to the counter and picked up the envelope. She noted the postmark, dated 3 weeks ago. He had planned this while they were vacationing in Napa. She opened the folder. Her eyes scanned the financial disclosures. The audacity. Dominic was confident. He was arrogant. But he had a blind spot. He thought Madeline Sterling was just an aging wife who signed checks. He forgot she was the woman who had built a dynasty in 1980s New York, a Shark Tank where weakness was a death sentence. She noticed something on page 4. A reference to a joint liquidity account. Dominic assumed she never checked the transaction logs because she trusted him to handle the day-to-day expenses. She pulled out her phone. She didn't call him. She didn't text him. She dialed a number she knew by heart. "William," she said, her voice steady. "Madeline? It's late. Is everything all right?" The lawyer's voice was warm, concerned. "The papers arrived. He wants the Hamptons house and $10 million. He's claiming he managed the portfolio." A pause on the other end. "Do you want me to file a counter motion in the morning?" "No," Madeline said, her eyes cold as she looked at the ocean. "Do not file anything. Do not contact his lawyers. Let him think I'm paralyzed with grief. I want a full forensic audit of the supplementary Amex card ending in 4099. Tonight." "Madeline, that card has a $500,000 limit. If he's gone rogue." "Just watch it, William. Don't freeze it. Not yet." She hung up. She walked to the window. The reflection showed a woman who looked tired, yes, but underneath the skin the steel was hardening. Dominic had made a fatal error. He gave her 48 hours. He thought that was a deadline for her surrender. In reality, he had just given her a 48-hour head start. Her phone buzzed on the marble counter. A single notification lit up the screen. "Bank alert, transaction pending. $6,500. The Ritz-Carlton, New York, suite upgrade and room service. Madeline stared at the glowing screen. He wasn't just staying at a hotel, he was celebrating. She picked up the phone, swiped the notification away, and opened her notes app. She typed a single line. Day 1, the expense of arrogance. Silence is heavy. It has a physical weight. For Dominic, the first 24 hours were the hardest. He sat in the plush velvet armchair of his suite at the Ritz-Carlton, staring at his iPhone. He had rehearsed this moment a dozen times. He expected Madeline to call, screaming, weeping, begging him to come home to talk. He was ready to play the role of the reluctant, burdened husband, offering her crumbs of hope in exchange for a quick signature on the settlement. But the phone was a black mirror. It didn't light up. She's in shock, he muttered to himself, tossing the device onto the bed. She doesn't know how to function without me. By day 3, the silence shifted from confusing to empowering. Dominic convinced himself that Madeline's lack of response was an admission of defeat. She was old, he reasoned. She was tired. The fight had left her before it even began. Enter Sienna. She arrived at the suite with a flurry of shopping bags and the scent of vanilla and ambition. Sienna was everything Madeline was not. Loud, chaotic, and hungry for validation. Still nothing? Sienna asked, kicking off her heels and flopping onto the sofa. She picked up the room service menu. Maybe she had a heart attack? Did you check the obituaries? Don't be crude, Dominic said, though he didn't scold her. He poured himself a drink. She's just processing the inevitable. The 48-hour deadline passed yesterday. Now, I have the upper hand. The longer she waits, the more panicked she'll get. Good, Sienna smirked, tracing the rim of her glass. Because I saw this incredible bag at the Hermes boutique on Madison. The limited edition one. You promised, Dom. Dominic hesitated for a fraction of a second. The supplementary card, the one linked to Madeline's private trust, was intended for household emergencies and travel expenses. But Madeline hadn't flagged the hotel bill. She hadn't frozen the accounts. Get it, Dominic said, his ego swelling. Get to. While Dominic was drinking champagne in Midtown, Madeline was walking through the ghosts of her marriage in the Hamptons. The house was too quiet. The silence here wasn't strategic, it was lonely. She spent the afternoon in the master bedroom. This was the silent pain no one saw. She didn't tear up photos, she didn't throw his clothes out the window. Instead, she methodically removed his presence. She took his Italian suits, his cashmere sweaters, the silk ties she had picked out for him for charity galas. She folded them neatly. She could smell his cologne, a scent she used to associate with safety, now reeking of deceit. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and stinging, but she let them fall without making a sound. She allowed herself 10 minutes to grieve the man she thought he was. Then she wiped her face, sealed the boxes, and labeled them. Donation. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was William. Madeline, William's voice was low. I'm looking at the transaction logs for the last 48 hours. Are you sitting down? I'm standing, William. Tell me. He's testing the waters. Small purchases at first. Uber Black. Dinners at Le Bernardin. But an hour ago, the card was swiped at Hermes. $25,000. Madeline walked to the window. The sun was setting, casting long, dark shadows across the lawn. He thinks I'm asleep at the wheel, she said. He's reckless, William countered. This is dissipation of marital assets. We can file an emergency injunction. We can lock him out now. No, Madeline said. Her voice was no longer trembling. $25,000 is a lot for a bag, but it's not enough for a prison sentence. Not yet. He needs to feel safe. He needs to feel like he owns that money. Madeline, this is dangerous. If he drains the liquid cash... I moved the main operating capital to the offshore trust 3 days before our anniversary, William. The account he's using is the honeypot. It has a ceiling, but he doesn't know that. She watched a seagull dive into the ocean, catching its prey. Let him buy the bag. Let him buy the dinner. Let him think he's the king of New York. What are you waiting for? William asked, exasperated but impressed. I'm waiting for him to make the mistake that turns a civil divorce into a criminal case. Madeline replied. He's greedy, William. The bag isn't enough. He'll want something bigger, and when he tries to take it, the trap snaps shut. She hung up. Madeline opened her banking app on her iPad. She saw the pending charge, Hermes Madison Ive, $25,400. She didn't feel anger anymore. She felt a cold, surgical precision. She took a screenshot. Then, she saw a new notification pop up. A travel alert. Airline booking confirmation, 2 first-class tickets, JFK to St. Barth's. Madeline zoomed in on the date. They were leaving in 2 days. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. St. Barth's. That was where she and Dominic had spent their honeymoon. The audacity was almost impressive. She opened her calendar and marked the date of their departure. She wouldn't stop them at the airport. That would be too cliché. She would let them fly. She would let them land. Because getting back into the country, and into her bank accounts, was going to be much harder than leaving. While Dominic and Sienna were posting Instagram stories from the first-class lounge at JFK, Madeline was sitting in a conference room on the 42nd floor of a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. The view of the city was breathtaking, a sea of lights stretching to the horizon. But Madeline was focused on the table in front of her. It was covered in bank statements, printed emails, and surveillance photos. William sat opposite her, alongside Marcus, a forensic accountant who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "We found the car," Marcus said, sliding a grainy photograph across the polished mahogany table. Madeline picked it up. It was taken 3 weeks ago, outside a nightclub in the meatpacking district. The car was a silver Mercedes S-Class, a vehicle Madeline had purchased as a joint car for them to attend galas in. In the photo, Dominic was in the driver's seat, laughing, his head thrown back. Next to him, in the passenger seat, Madeline's seat, sat Sienna. Her feet were on the dashboard. She was holding a bottle of champagne, spraying it out of the sunroof. Madeline stared at the image. It wasn't just the infidelity that stung, it was the disrespect. That car was where they had discussed their future, where he had held her hand after her mother's funeral. Now it was just a playground for his mistress. "It gets worse," William said gently, interrupting her thoughts. "The car isn't just a toy, it's a tax write-off." "Explain," Madeline said, placing the photo down face down. Marcus tapped a spreadsheet on his laptop. "Dominic has been listing the Mercedes, the dinners, and even the rental of that Hamptons party house last summer as business expenses for the Sterling Foundation." Madeline felt a chill run down her spine. The Sterling Foundation was her life's work. It built libraries for underprivileged schools. It funded cancer research. It was named after her father. "He's stealing from the charity?" she whispered. "He's not just stealing," Marcus clarified, turning the laptop so she could see. "He's laundering. Look at this. Every month, he transfers $15,000 from the foundation to a vendor called Aurora Consulting for strategic planning. We looked into Aurora Consulting. It's a shell company registered in the Cayman Islands." "And the sole signatory for Aurora?" Madeline asked, though she already knew the answer. "Dominic," William confirmed. "He's been funneling money out of your legacy to fund his lifestyle with Sienna. That engagement ring he's planning to buy? It's probably going to be paid for by money meant for pediatric oncology." Madeline stood up. She walked to the window, her reflection ghosting against the city lights. For the first time since the divorce papers arrived, the sadness evaporated. The lingering affection, the memories of his charm, the hope that this was just a midlife crisis. It all turned to ash. Stealing from her was one thing. Stealing from the foundation was a violation of her soul. "He's not just a cheater," Madeline said, her voice dropping an octave, devoid of any warmth. "He's a criminal." "We have enough for a lawsuit," William said. "We can sue him for embezzlement." "No," Madeline turned back to them. Her eyes were dry and dangerous. "A lawsuit means a settlement. He'll pay a fine and walk away. I want more." She looked at the spreadsheet again. "He thinks he's hidden the trail," she said. "He thinks because the company is in the Caymans, we can't touch it. But he forgot that I sit on the board of the bank he used to transfer the funds." She tapped a fingernail on the table. "William, draft the papers, not for a lawsuit, for the district attorney. But don't file them yet. He's going to St. Barth's. Let him go. Let him spend. Let him feel untouchable." "And when he comes back?" Marcus asked. Madeline picked up the photo of the Mercedes one last time. She looked at Sienna's feet on the dashboard. "When he comes back," Madeline said, "he won't have a home to return to, or a car, or a name." She checked her watch. It was midnight. "Go home, gentlemen. Get some sleep. The real work begins tomorrow." As she left the office, her phone pinged with a notification from Instagram. It was a suggested post. Sienna had just uploaded a selfie from the plane, holding a glass of champagne with the caption, "New Beginnings. Love wins." Madeline didn't block her. She took a screenshot. It was just another piece of evidence for the file. The sun over St. Barth's was relentless, bleaching the wooden deck of the private villa to a bone white. It was day 20. Dominic lay on a teak lounger, watching the infinity pool merge seamlessly with the Caribbean Sea. He took a sip of his mojito, the condensation cold against his hand. He checked his phone. Still no reply from Madeline. For the first week, her silence had unnerved him. Now, it emboldened him. In his mind, silence was the sound of a woman who had realized she was beaten. She was likely huddled in that cavernous apartment in New York, paralyzed by the fear of public scandal, terrified of the option B he had threatened. "She's folding," he thought, adjusting his sunglasses. "She just doesn't know how to tell me yet." Sienna swam to the edge of the pool, pulling herself up. She looked like a magazine cover, wet hair slicked back, golden skin glistening. But her expression was less picturesque. It was impatient. "Are we extending the rental?" she asked, wringing out her hair. "The concierge needs to know by noon." "Extend it," Dominic waved a hand dismissively. "Put it on the card." "The card works?" Sienna asked, a hint of genuine surprise in her voice. "I mean, she hasn't cut you off?" "She wouldn't dare," Dominic scoffed. "Madeline cares about appearances more than money. Freezing my card would mean admitting to the bank and to her social circle that her husband is at war with her. She's too proud for that. She's letting me spend because she's afraid of what I'll do if she stops me." He picked up his phone. He decided to twist the knife, just to ensure the settlement was signed before they returned. He typed a message. "It's been 20 days, Madeline. Silence doesn't change the facts. Sign the agreement by Friday or I'll instructing my team to subpoena your medical records. I'm trying to be gracious here. Don't make me destroy you." He hit send. The blue bubble appeared. Delivered. 2,000 miles away, in the crisp autumn air of Central Park, Madeline felt her phone vibrate in her coat pocket. She didn't stop walking. She was strolling with William along the reservoir, the skyline of the Upper West Side reflected in the water. She wore a camel trench coat and a cashmere scarf, blending in with the other New Yorkers seeking a moment of peace. She pulled out the phone, read the text, and stopped. William stopped too. "Him?" Madeline handed him the phone. William read it, his jaw tightening. "Subpoena medical records?" "That's low, even for him. He's bluffing, but it's vicious." "He's not bluffing," Madeline said calmly, taking the phone back. "He's desperate. He's confusing my silence with weakness." She looked at the ducks floating on the water. "How are the accounts, William?" "The honeypot account is down to its last $70,000, William replied. "He's burned through nearly $400,000 in 3 weeks. The villa, the first-class flights, the jewelry, he's spending like there's no tomorrow." "Good," Madeline nodded. "Let him finish it." "Madeline," William warned, "once that account hits zero, the overdraft protection kicks in. But per your instruction, we removed the overdraft protection yesterday." "Exactly. So the next big purchase." William trailed off. "The next big purchase will be declined," Madeline finished the sentence. "And when it is, the bank's fraud algorithm, which I personally helped design for their VIP clients 10 years ago, will flag the account due to unusual international activity and rapid depletion. It will lock everything. Not just the supplementary card, everything linked to his social security number within our joint profile." She looked at the text message one last time. "Don't make me destroy you." She deleted the thread without replying. "He wants a reaction," she said, resuming her walk. "He wants me to fight back so he feels significant. I won't give him that satisfaction. I'm not going to destroy him, William. I'm just going to let him realize he's already destroyed himself." Back in St. Barth's, Dominic watched the read receipt appear under his message. No typing bubbles followed, no reply. He laughed, a sharp, triumphant sound. "See?" he told Sienna, pulling her onto the lounger beside him. She read it. "She's scared? We've won." Sienna smiled, tracing a finger down his chest. "If we've won, then what about that promise you made? The one about the upgrade?" She held up her hand, wiggling her ring finger. Dominic felt a surge of adrenaline. He was the man, the provider, the victor. Pack your bags, he said, grinning. We're flying back tomorrow, and our first stop in the city will be Tiffany's. Pick whatever you want, the biggest rock they have. He didn't know it yet, but he had just scheduled his own execution. The private salon on the second floor of Tiffany & Co. on Fifth Avenue was a sanctuary of hushed voices and velvet surfaces. Outside, the New York traffic snarled. Inside, the air smelled of fresh lilies and money. Dominic sat on a gray love seat, sipping an espresso served on a silver tray. He watched Sienna try on the ring. It was a 3-carat emerald-cut diamond flanked by sapphires. It was gaudy, ostentatious, and expensive. Exactly the kind of statement piece he wanted to flaunt. It's perfect, Dom. Sienna breathed, turning her hand under the spotlight. The diamond fractured the light into 1,000 rainbows. It screams, I've arrived. It's yours, Dominic said, leaning back with the relaxed confidence of a man who believes the world owes him everything. Wrap it up. The sales associate, a man named Arthur with impeccable posture and white gloves, nodded respectfully. An excellent choice, sir. The total comes to $58,400, including tax. Dominic didn't flinch. He reached into his leather wallet and pulled out the heavy titanium black card. It was the supplementary card linked to Madeline's primary trust, the magic wand that had granted him a life of leisure for 5 years. He placed it on the glass counter with a distinctive clink. Put it on this, Dominic said. Arthur took the card with both hands. 1 moment, please. Dominic winked at Sienna. She giggled, already mentally composing the caption for her Instagram reveal. The room was silent for 10 seconds. Then, 20. Dominic checked his watch. He looked up. Arthur was standing at the terminal, his brow furrowed slightly. He typed something, waited, and then swiped the card a second time. A sharp, dissonant beep cut through the quiet. Arthur returned to the counter, his expression pained but professional. He didn't hand the card back. I apologize, sir, Arthur said, his voice dropping to a discreet whisper. The transaction has been declined. The smile froze on Sienna's face. Dominic let out a short, incredulous laugh. That's impossible. It's a black card. There's no limit. Your machine must be having connectivity issues. I tried the chip and the magnetic strip, sir, Arthur said, his eyes avoiding Dominic's. The bank returned a do not honor code. Do not honor? Dominic stood up, his face flushing a deep, angry red. The humiliation began to prickle at his neck. Do you know who I am? Do you know who my wife is? Run it again. Dom, Sienna hissed, looking around. A couple at the next counter, tourists from Dubai, had stopped looking at necklaces and were now watching them. People are staring. I don't care, Dominic snapped. He turned back to Arthur. Run. It again. Arthur took a deep breath. Sir, when I attempted the second override, the system gave me a specific instruction. I am required to retain the card. The air left the room. What? Dominic whispered. The card has been reported as lost or stolen, Arthur said, placing the titanium card into a secure slot under the counter. I cannot return it to you. It is bank policy. Stolen, Dominic shouted, slamming his hand on the glass. It's my name on the card. Give it back. Security guards, dressed in dark suits, materialized at the entrance of the salon. They didn't approach, but their presence was a silent threat. Sienna stood up, her face burning. She pulled the ring off her finger and dropped it onto the velvet tray as if it were radioactive. This is mortifying, she muttered. She grabbed her purse. I'm going to wait in the car. Sienna, wait. Dominic reached for her, but she sidestepped him, her eyes cold. The illusion of the powerful provider had shattered in less than 3 minutes. She walked out, leaving him alone with the sales staff and the security team. Dominic stood there, his hand trembling. He wasn't just embarrassed, he was exposed. The safety net was gone. The money was gone. He realized then that the silence of the last 30 days wasn't submission. It was an ambush. He pulled out his phone. His fingers shook as he dialed Madeline's number. For 29 days, she hadn't answered. Today, on the second ring, the line clicked open. Madeline, Dominic barked, his voice cracking with a mix of rage and panic. What the hell is going on? I'm at Tiffany's and they just cut up my card. There was a pause, a sip of tea. Hello, Dominic. Her voice came through the speaker, crisp, clear, and absolutely terrifying, its calmness. I trust you enjoyed your trip to St. Barth's. Dominic stumbled out of the revolving doors onto the sidewalk of Fifth Avenue. The noise of the city hit him like a physical blow. Sirens, car horns, the chatter of tourists. He pressed the phone hard against his ear, his other hand gripping the back of his neck, sweating despite the chill in the air. St. Barth's? Dominic stammered, his voice tight. You were tracking me? I didn't have to track you, Dominic. Madeline's voice remained impossibly calm. You charged the flights to the family trust. You really have become careless. Stop playing games, Madeline, Dominic shouted, ignoring the passers-by who stared at him. Call the bank. Tell them it's a mistake. I have a hotel bill to settle tonight. I have expenses. If you don't unlock that card right now, I swear You'll what? Madeline cut him off. You'll leave me? You already did. You'll sue me? With what money? Dominic froze. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I'm not calling the bank, Madeline continued, and neither can you. The accounts haven't been frozen because of a divorce dispute, Dominic. They've been frozen because the bank's fraud department flagged a series of illegal wire transfers to a shell company called Aurora Consulting. Dominic felt his knees buckle. He leaned against the stone facade of the building for support. How do you know about that? I know everything, she said. Her tone wasn't angry, it was disappointed, which somehow cut deeper. I know about the fake invoices. I know about the kickbacks from the foundation, and I know about the diamond ring you just tried to buy with stolen money. It was a loan, Dominic pleaded, his arrogance evaporating into pure desperation. I was going to pay it back. Madeline, please. We can talk about this. I'll come home, we'll fix this. There is no home for you to come back to, Madeline replied. The locks were changed 3 hours ago. Your personal effects have been sent to a storage unit in Queens. The first month is paid for. After that, it's up to you. You can't do this. Dominic screamed, tears of panic pricking his eyes. I'm your husband. Technically, yes, Madeline said. Which is why I'm giving you one piece of advice. Do not go back to the hotel. The police are waiting in the lobby with a warrant for embezzlement. If I were you, I'd find a good lawyer. Preferably one who accepts pro bono work because your assets, well, let's just say they've been seized as evidence. Madeline, wait. Don't hang up. I love you, please. Goodbye, Dominic. Click. The line went dead. Dominic pulled the phone away from his ear and stared at the screen. The call had lasted exactly 42 seconds. He stood alone on the busiest street in New York City. He had no money, no credit cards, no place to sleep, and the woman he had underestimated for 5 years had just systematically dismantled his entire existence without raising her voice. He looked down the street toward his hotel. In the distance, he saw the flashing red and blue lights of a police cruiser parked near the entrance. Madeline wasn't bluffing. For the first time in his life, Dominic felt the crushing weight of consequences. He turned around and started walking in the opposite direction, disappearing into the crowd, a man on the run in the city he thought he owned. Madeline placed her phone gently onto the saucer of her porcelain teacup. She was sitting in the conservatory of the private women's club she had belonged to for 40 years. Around her, friends were discussing literature and art, completely unaware that she had just executed a masterful takedown. She took a deep breath. Her hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally letting go. William sat across from her. He didn't say a word, he just poured her a fresh cup of tea. It's done, Madeline whispered. It's done. William nodded. The detectives have the files. The forensic team has secured the servers. You're free. Madeline looked out the window at the garden. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but she brushed it away immediately. I don't feel free yet, she admitted. I feel heavy. That's the weight of the armor, William said softly. You've been carrying it for a month. You can take it off now. Madeline smiled, a genuine, tired smile. She picked up her tea. Not yet, she said. I still have to watch him fall. Dominic stood in front of the limestone facade of the Park Avenue building. It was the building he had lived in for 5 years, the address that had opened every door in Manhattan for him. He punched the code into the keypad. Error. He tried again. Error. He pressed the intercom button for the concierge, forcing a smile he didn't feel. Henry? It's Dominic. My key fob seems to be demagnetized. Buzz me in, would you? The voice that crackled back was static and cold. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling. I cannot grant you access. What do you mean? Dominic gripped the brass railing. I live here, Henry. I gave you $1,000 Christmas tip. Mrs. Sterling has instructed us that you are no longer a resident, Henry replied, his tone devoid of the usual deference. And we have been advised by the NYPD to deny entry pending an ongoing investigation. Please step away from the door, or I will have to call the authorities. The intercom clicked off. Dominic stepped back, looking up at the penthouse windows. They were dark. He felt a sudden, violent urge to throw a rock, to scream, but he saw a neighbor walking her poodle across the street, watching him. He pulled his collar up and walked away. He needed money. He needed a place to stay. He pulled out his phone. He had 12% battery left. He scrolled through his contacts. He called Brad, a hedge fund manager he played golf with every Tuesday. Hey Brad, Dominic said, trying to sound casual. Crazy situation. Locked myself out, wallets inside. Mind if I crash at your place in Tribeca for a night? Dom, Brad's voice was clipped. I heard. Heard what? The audit, the fraud allegations. Word travels fast, man. My compliance officer would kill me if I associated with you right now. Don't call me again. Call ended. Dominic tried 3 more numbers. A drinking buddy, a real estate partner, even his personal trainer. Voicemail. Rejection. Blocked. The social ladder he had climbed so aggressively had disappeared beneath his feet. He realized with sickening clarity that these people didn't like him. They liked Madeline's husband. They liked the access, the galas, the proximity to the Sterling fortune. Without Madeline, he was just a middle-aged man with a maxed-out credit card and a criminal record in the making. Desperate, he thought of Sienna. She was angry at the store, sure, but she loved him. They were a team. They had planned a future together. She would understand. She had her own apartment in Soho. He opened Instagram to send her a DM, hoping she hadn't blocked him. The first thing that popped up on his feed was a live video. It was Sienna. She was sitting in her car, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face. The caption read, "The truth about Dominic." Dominic froze on the street corner, staring at the screen. I had no idea, Sienna sobbed into the camera, wiping her eyes with a tissue. He told me they were separated. He told me he was using his own money. I'm a victim here, guys. He manipulated me just like he manipulated her. I'm so sorry to Madeline Sterling. I didn't know I was dating a monster. Dominic felt like he had been punched in the gut. A monster? He whispered to the screen. You picked out the ring. You spent the money. But the comment section was already flooding with support for Sienna and vitriol for him. Stay strong, girl. Men like him are trash. Team Madeline. She wasn't just leaving him. She was rewriting history to save her own brand. She was throwing him to the wolves to keep her follower count intact. Dominic sat down on a cold metal bench near Central Park. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, bone-chilling exhaustion. He had no wife, no lover, no home, no money. And judging by the news alert that just flashed across his screen, husband of hotel tycoon Madeline Sterling wanted for questioning in charity embezzlement scheme, he was about to become very famous for all the wrong reasons. He looked at the empty street. It was starting to rain. He had spent 5 years building a life of luxury, thinking he was the architect. Now he realized he had just been a guest in Madeline's world. And the lease was up. Dominic spent his final hour of freedom in a 24-hour diner on the edge of Hell's Kitchen. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a stark contrast to the candlelight of the restaurants he was used to. He nursed a cup of lukewarm black coffee, his designer suit wrinkled and damp from the rain. He looked at the other patrons, tired shift workers, truck drivers, drifters. For the first time in 5 years, he was one of them. He was just a man with nowhere to go. 2 men in plain clothes walked in. They didn't look like diners, they looked like sharks. They scanned the room, and their eyes locked onto Dominic. Dominic didn't run. He didn't have the energy left to run. He just set his coffee cup down. Dominic Sterling? The older detective asked, flashing a badge. We have a warrant for your arrest. On what grounds? Dominic asked, his voice raspy. He tried to summon the ghost of his former arrogance, but it came out as a whisper. Grand larceny, wire fraud, and embezzlement from a charitable organization, the detective recited, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Turn around, please. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was loud in the quiet diner. People watched. No one offered to help. No one knew who he was. You're making a mistake, Dominic mumbled as they led him out to the unmarked sedan. My wife, She can explain. Your wife is the one who pressed the charges, Mr. Sterling, the detective said as he guided Dominic's head into the back seat. The central processing unit at the precinct was a world away from Park Avenue. It smelled of bleach and unwashed bodies. Dominic was stripped of his dignity layer by layer. First, his belt, then his shoelaces. Finally, the Patek Philippe watch, the one Madeline had given him, was catalogued and dropped into a plastic evidence bag. Sign here, the booking officer grunted. Dominic stared at the bag. That watch was worth more than this officer made in a year. Now it was just item number 409. They took his fingerprints. They took his mugshot. The flash blinded him for a second, capturing the image of a man who had fallen from the dizzying heights of luxury to the concrete floor of a holding cell in less than 12 hours. He sat on the metal bench in the holding cell. It was cold. He wrapped his arms around himself. "Lawyer," he croaked. "I want a lawyer." "You can use the phone," the guard said, pointing to a payphone on the wall. "Collect calls only." Dominic stared at the phone. Who would accept the charges? Brad? Sienna? His parents in Ohio who thought he was a successful venture capitalist? Across town in the warm, mahogany-paneled library of the townhouse, Madeline sat by the fireplace. The fire crackled softly. William put down his phone. "They have him," William said quietly. "He's being processed now. Bail hearing is set for tomorrow morning. Given the flight risk and the amount of money missing, the DA is going to ask for a very high bond." Madeline stared into the flames. She didn't smile. She didn't cheer. "Did he resist?" she asked. "No." He went quietly. Madeline nodded slowly. She reached for a file on the table, the final forensic audit report. It showed every dollar he had stolen, every lie he had told. It was a roadmap of his betrayal. "I loved him, William," she said, her voice soft but steady. "That's the part that angers me the most. Not the money. The money is just paper. It's that I loved him, and he looked at me and saw nothing but a bank account." "He saw what he wanted to see," William said, "and he missed what was actually there. He didn't know he was waking a sleeping giant." Madeline closed the file. The sound was final, like a gavel striking a block. "Is the press release ready?" she asked. "Yes, it states that the Sterling Foundation has uncovered internal irregularities and is cooperating fully with authorities. It emphasizes that you initiated the investigation. It separates your reputation from his crimes." "Send it," Madeline said. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city that had chewed Dominic up and spit him out. "Let the world know," she whispered. "I am not the victim. I am the witness for the prosecution." The courtroom in Lower Manhattan was devoid of the glamour Dominic had spent his life chasing. There were no chandeliers, only buzzing fluorescent lights. There was no plush velvet, only hard wooden benches that smelled of lemon polish and anxiety. Madeline sat in the front row, her hands folded in her lap. She wore a navy blue suit, tailored to perfection, her posture rigid. Beside her, William sat with a calm, predatory stillness. When the side door opened, the air in the room seemed to thin. Dominic walked in. He wasn't wearing the bespoke Italian suits that had defined him for 5 years. He wore a generic gray suit provided by his public defender, which hung loosely on his frame. He had lost weight. His skin was sallow, the result of 2 months in Rikers Island awaiting trial. He scanned the room, his eyes darting frantically until they landed on Madeline. He stopped. For a moment, a flicker of hope crossed his face. The delusional hope of a man who still believed he could charm his way out of a burning building. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to say her name, but the bailiff nudged him forward. "All rise," the clerk announced. The proceedings were brutal in their efficiency. There was no grand dramatic argument, no surprise witness bursting through the doors. The evidence Madeline and William had compiled was a fortress. There was no way to breach it. The prosecutor stood up. "Your Honor, the defendant, Dominic Sterling, engaged in a systemic looting of the Sterling Foundation. He didn't just steal money, he stole from children with cancer. He stole from underfunded schools. He used these funds to finance a lavish lifestyle for himself and his mistress, Sienna Miller, who, I might add, has fully cooperated with the state in exchange for immunity." Dominic flinched. Hearing Sienna's name, and her betrayal confirmed out loud, was a physical blow. He slumped in his chair. When it was time for the defense, Dominic's lawyer mumbled something about lapse in judgment. and pressures of high society. It was weak. It sounded pathetic even to Dominic's own ears. Then the judge looked over his glasses at Dominic. "Mr. Sterling, do you have anything to say before I pass sentence?" Dominic stood up. His hands were shaking. He turned, not to the judge, but to Madeline. "Madeline," he choked out, his voice cracking. The courtroom went silent. I got lost. I wanted to be someone you could be proud of. I never meant to hurt you, please." It was a performance, but it was also the rawest truth he had ever spoken. He was begging not for the court's mercy, but for hers. Madeline looked at him. In the past, this look would have broken her. She would have seen the boy she fell in love with, but today, under the harsh courtroom lights, she saw him clearly. She saw the vanity, the greed, the hollowness. She didn't look at him with hatred. Hatred requires energy. Hatred implies that he still had power over her emotions. Instead, her expression was one of profound, distant pity. It was the way one looks at a building that has collapsed due to a poor foundation. She didn't speak. She simply held his gaze for 3 seconds, then turned her head to face the judge. The silence from her was louder than any scream. It told him, "You are no longer my concern." Dominic felt the finality of it. He turned back to the judge, defeated. "The court finds the defendant guilty on all counts," the judge's voice boomed. "You are sentenced to 5 years in a federal correctional facility, followed by 5 years of probation. You are also ordered to pay full restitution of $2 million to the Sterling Foundation." The gavel banged, a sharp wooden crack that echoed like a gunshot. Dominic's legs gave out. The bailiff caught him by the arm. As they clicked the handcuffs back onto his wrists, he looked back one last time. But Madeline was already standing up. She was putting on her sunglasses. She turned her back to him and walked toward the exit, the heels of her shoes clicking rhythmically on the floor. She didn't look back. Outside the courtroom, the press was waiting. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust forward. "Mrs. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, do you have a comment on your husband's sentencing?" Madeline paused at the top of the stairs. She adjusted her silk scarf. "My husband?" she said, her voice cool and composed. "I'm afraid you are mistaken. I don't have a husband. I have a future." She stepped into the waiting car, and the door closed, sealing out the noise. 6 months later. The golden hour in Napa Valley was unlike anywhere else on Earth. The light didn't just hit the rolling hills. It seemed to saturate them, turning the rows of grapevines into ribbons of gold and amber. Madeline stood on the terrace of her newly acquired estate, the Sterling Reserve. The air smelled of rosemary, dry earth, and the faint, sweet promise of the coming harvest. She wore a loose white linen dress and a wide-brimmed hat, a stark contrast to the armored suits and stiff chignons she had worn in the trenches of Manhattan. She wasn't running away. She was planting roots. She walked through the rows of Cabernet Sauvignon grapes, running her fingers over the rough bark of the vines. These vines were old, 50 years or more. They had survived droughts, storms, and pests. They had struggled, and because of that struggle, they produced the most complex, valuable fruit. She smiled. She understood them perfectly. The soil report came back. A familiar voice called out from the patio. Madeline turned. William was walking toward her, holding 2 glasses of wine. He had traded his pinstripe suit for a casual polo shirt, looking 10 years younger. "And?" Madeline asked, taking the glass he offered. "The acidity is perfect." William smiled, clinking his glass against hers. "This is going to be a legendary year." They walked together toward the edge of the property, looking out over the valley. The silence between them was comfortable, filled with the history of 30 years of friendship that had, in the quiet aftermath of the storm, begun to bloom into something deeper, something patient. "I got a call from the warden today," William said softly, testing the waters. Madeline didn't flinch. She took a sip of the wine. It was bold, with a finish that lingered. "Oh, Dominic filed an appeal," William said. "He claims ineffective counsel. He wants a retrial. He also sent a letter. He says he's changed. He says prison has given him spiritual clarity." Madeline looked at the horizon, where the sun was beginning to dip behind the Mayacamas mountains. 6 months ago, hearing his name would have spiked her heart rate. It would have brought back the sting of the betrayal, the image of the messy apartment, the humiliation at Tiffany's. But now, she felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even pity. He was just a ghost, a character in a book she had finished reading and put back on the shelf. "Do you want to read the letter?" William asked, reaching into his pocket. Madeline placed a hand gently on his arm, stopping him. "No," she said. Her voice was light, carried away by the evening breeze. "Tell the legal team to handle the appeal. Use the standard dismissal protocols. As for the letter..." She looked at the vast, thriving vineyard around her, a multi-million-dollar empire she had built for herself on her own terms, free from the parasites who sought to drain her. "Burn it," she said. "We don't need dead leaves in a new vineyard." William smiled, a look of genuine admiration in his eyes. He put the letter back in his pocket, never to be mentioned again. "To the future?" William toasted. Madeline looked at him, then back at her estate. She thought about the 30 days of silence that had saved her life. It had been the hardest month of her existence, but it had bought her this. It had bought her peace. She raised her glass high, catching the last ray of the dying sun. "No, William," she corrected him gently, her eyes sparkling with a renewed, fierce joy. "To the present. The future can wait. I'm quite happy right here." She took a drink, savoring the taste. It tasted like freedom. The charity gala at the Met was a sea of flashing cameras and forced smiles, but for Madeline, it was remarkably quiet. She moved through the crowd, not as a scorned woman, but as a matriarch. A young associate from her former firm approached her, hesitating. "Mrs. Sterling," he said quietly. "I saw him. Dominic. He's working valet parking at a steakhouse in Jersey. He tried to say hello to Mr. Thorne, but, well, nobody recognized him." Madeline took a sip of sparkling water. There was no spike of adrenaline, no urge to gloat. The irreversible consequence of his greed wasn't just prison, it was erasure. He had been deleted from the world he so desperately wanted to own. "I hope he finds peace," Madeline said genuinely. She meant it. Anger was too heavy a luggage to carry into her new life. Later that night, sitting by her fireplace with William, she watched the embers glow. She realized the silence she had weaponized for 30 days had transformed into a sanctuary. "You won," William said softly. Madeline shook her head. "I didn't win by destroying him. I won by returning to myself." She stood up to clear the table, spotting a small, dusty leather satchel that the police had returned from Dominic's evidence locker. It was marked personal effects, non-evidentiary. She hadn't opened it in 6 months. She decided to throw it out. But as she lifted it, she felt something shift inside the lining. A hard, rectangular lump sewn into the bottom seam. Curiosity got the better of her. She grabbed a letter opener and sliced the stitching. It wasn't money. It wasn't a love letter. It was a second phone. Madeline's breath hitched. It was an old model, its battery dead, but taped to the back was a SIM card and a small folded piece of paper with a list of dates. The dates went back 10 years, long before he met her. She unfolded the paper. At the bottom, circled in red ink, was a single phrase that made her blood run cold. "Target acquired, the Sterling estate." Madeline stared at the phone. He hadn't just been a gold digger, he had been sent. "And then I found the thing he thought I'd never look for."